Okay, so this is episode one of a to be named podcast. In true software developer fashion, we cannot figure out a name for this podcast. So right now it doesn't have one. So this is going to be a podcast where we read books, essentially. The premise for this first series, I guess, which is going to take a very long time, is to read through the works of Brandon Sanderson, specifically the Cosmere. So, my name is Mike, and this is my co-host Alex.
Yo,
Uh,
or hi. I don't know.
I have read the books before. I've read most of the Cosmere. I've gone through everything except for Elantris, and now I'm doing the second era of Mistborn, and then I should be caught up, except for the secret projects. And Alex has not read any of the Cosmere books before, so we get to experience his newbie reactions, and I get to try and remember things and try to, convey all of the connections that exist without trying to
Mm.
spoil anything. So it should be interesting. I mean, I really enjoy these books. I'm looking forward to reading them again for the second time. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Alex's reaction to some of this stuff. So yeah, that is the basics of it. So I'll just talk about me. Software developer. Again, I've been getting into reading fantasy over the last couple years, and it was Mistborn that got me really into it. So once I read that, I've gone through most of Sanderson's work, as well as a couple other authors here and there. And Alex, I know you are primarily a sci-fi guy, if I'm correct, right?
Yes. So, hey, I'm Alex. Software engineer, software developer type of dealio as well. But yeah, I'm jumping into the foray of fantasy not too long ago, actually. So
Hmm.
I now have so much more time to read books again
Yeah.
after finishing my master's. So now I've like accrued so much in my bookshelf that I have to start reading something at some point. And so when Mike had recommended, "Yeah, Brian Sanders are pretty cool," and he's been like talking to me about it for years, I'm like, okay, cool. But I've been like reading Ian M. Banks, uh, I guess something from William Gibson,
Hmm.
um, Stanislaw Lem's, like very much like hardcore like space opera, sci-fi stuff.
Right.
And then now I'm just like, okay, let's take a break from sci-fi. Let's pick up something from Brian Sanderson. And so we were like, hey, let's make a podcast about it, talk about it. And so Elantris, not too bad for the beginning. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, we got the same. Okay,
Yeah, we
awesome.
got the same one. I mean, it's hard to. I do have a hardcover of this, first edition
Ah,
hardcover, but I don't want to read it because I want to keep it in good condition. And I'm
what's
pretty
the
sure
point
this
of having it if you're not gonna read it?
is so it can look pretty on my shelf.
Oh my goodness. Jeez.
But I mean, I could ask the same question as to why you have two keyboards sitting behind you, and I'm sure at least one on your desk. But we won't go there. Um,
Well, it's because then I get to use all three of them. It just depends on what I'm feeling that day.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think this mass market paperback, like this small one, is the only one in circulation right now because I don't think you can
Yes.
find a hardcover or even the larger paperbacks anymore.
No, I had a chat with my local bookstore, and they said
Hmm.
like, yeah, all the hardcovers like editions have been printed. There's no more, and so
Yeah.
whatever they have left was the small one that that we have.
Yeah,
I
fair enough. Now
have to
that I
say,
am, pretty into reading and stuff, I have a bunch of series that are on my TBR. And when a
mm.
new book comes out, I make a point to buy the hardcover, even if I'm not going to read it for a while, just because I know
Oh,
they're going to go out of print soon. So all of the new books that come out, I try to pick those up because I
mm.
don't know, I like hardcovers. I think they look really nice.
Oh, I love hardcovers. It just feels so much better to read.
It does. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
got some heft to it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like paperbacks, the small ones have they're just fit for carrying it with you and
Hmm.
getting it dirty, but like the print fades when you put your hands on fingers on it. It
It's just
like
cheaper,
wears
right?
and tears. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I'm jumping into this. I have zero expectations for Brandon Sanderson. Um, I like Mike, you shared with me a few videos of his Sander facts, which are
Yep.
just him like, hey, everybody who are jumping into my books, here's what you need to know, and here's like some some things that you need to like understand of how or what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
so from what I remember, Elantris was out of the 12 books or the 12 manuscripts that he wrote, it was the first one that actually got published, and it was like book or script number 6 or something like that.
Hmm.
And I think in that video he's like, it's the first one ever like published. It's pretty raw, like it gets better from there. But like that's kind of biased, Sanderson. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's actually really good at providing like commentary on where he is as a writer in his series.
mm,
Like that's one thing I noticed and I appreciate about him is, you know, he says that Elantris, that he evolved as a writer after Elantris to do Mistborn, and even that he got better as a writer when he got to Stormlight Archive. So it's really cool to see. Honestly, we won't be talking about Elantris in this episode because this is just
mm,
the intro episode. I have read the first chapter of Elantris, and I think it's great. I've read all of his other works, and this one seems fine to me. I haven't noticed anything terrible. It is only the first chapter, but it's been
yeah,
really engaging, and I've really liked it. So yeah.
it's better than this other book that we're reading for book club. And let me just pull it out here.
Oh God.
And like, I don't mean to like put any authors on blast, but it's not so hot. Sorry.
Malice.
Yeah.
I think it'll get better.
We'll see. But
Anyways,
anyway,
so one thing I do want to say, one of my main reasons for wanting to do this podcast is because when reading Sanderson's work, especially in the Cosmere, with how things can be interconnected and stuff, there are a lot of like holy shit moments, and I didn't have anyone to talk about with that. So now we get to go through it and have those holy shit moments together, and I can talk with someone about it, which is going to be great. And if we ever do bring someone else onto this podcast, so they can share in the joy of like, wow, can't believe this happened.
yeah,
So yeah,
like,
I think it's going to be pretty fun.
I'm excited for it too. I mean, I've read ahead a bit more
I know, yeah.
in Elantris, and it's actually surprisingly good. And so the introduction to all 3 characters that we'll get to follow along are very distinctly unique,
Mm-hmm.
and are going to be like tackling, from what I could tell, assumptions already. They're going to be converging at some point together, but they're all like starting at different areas and
Right.
uncovering some mysteries and preventing some big wars, I'm going to assume.
Mm-hmm. That happens a
Ooh,
lot
spoilers.
in fantasy books, I find,
Mm-hmm.
and it also happens a lot specifically in Sanderson's books.
Mm-hmm.
The characters will be in different parts, and they'll kind of come together. So yeah. Anyways, before we take on, we're decided to take on the Cosmere, you did some homework. I also did a little bit of homework, just watching
Nice.
some videos about the Cosmere and what it is, and you know, how it works. So I know what I think about the Cosmere. What do you think about the Cosmere as a new reader? Like what is your understanding of it?
I mean, all right, okay, so I mean, it's large, and
Yeah.
Sanderson is still adding to it.
Yep.
I do like the fact, like in some series of his, he does like a timeline jump per book.
Yes.
Like I want to say decades into the future, centuries into the future, and they reference those characters from previous books. I think like you mentioned that they like some of those heroes and major players were like immortalized as town names and whatnot, and their works are like continued and recognized and so forth. So it's pretty cool. I mentioned Ian and Banks not too long ago, and he has his own universe with the culture in this case, where it's still like it jumps around the timeline of it, but you're not really sure like when the culture starts, which is like it's a civilization governed and monitored by very advanced AI. We'll go into that. So like that aspect of an author developing their own universe is not a new concept for me. So it's cool to see it again here, but this time it's a fantasy version.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that completely makes sense. So from I can give you a little bit more information about the Cosmere. I'll try not to obviously spoil anything, and I don't think it will, but so the Cosmere is essentially the universe that all of these series take place in. Each series takes place on a different planet. Each planet has different magic systems, and everything is interconnected in different ways. I won't really go into the details here as to how they're interconnected. As we go through the books, I will try to, like, if maybe you miss a connection and it's a connection that I know about, I will try to point it out. But yeah, I would just say, if you want to read it and get all of these connections, read it a little slowly and pay attention, because some things could be just like a sentence and it has huge implications for the entirety of the Cosmere, or it's a huge reveal that is just like one sentence at the end of a book or something.
Mm.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, mentioning the end of the books, there is this thing in Sanderson books called the Sanderlanche, and you know
I'm
it's
sorry.
coming. You know it's coming when you reach. So normally, each chapter is a different character.
Okay.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
consecutive chapters will follow the same character or whatever. But when you're reading a chapter and in between the chapter it switches perspectives, that generally
Mm.
happens at the end of the book, and that's because a lot of stuff is going to start happening. So the Sanderson books are kind of a slow build until the climax, which is
Mm.
the Sanderlanche, and then everything happens. And that is in a lot of the books. It's not in every book that I've read from him, but it's in a lot of them. And that's when the pace starts to pick up and you kind of don't want to put the book down. So
Gotcha. Okay.
even though we are going to be reading on a certain cadence in this podcast, that you might find that difficult. So that's
Hmm.
actually a really good segue into our plan for reading all of this stuff. So what is the plan for getting through the Cosmere? So our reading order, which I think is probably the only reading order that is legit. I don't know, that could be argued.
And it's based on
Um,
Sanderson's own list of reading.
well, it's based on publication. I mean, so a lot of people say, like, you could, there's different reading orders. You could read
Mm.
Elantris, you could read all of Mistborn together, you could read all of Stormlight together to try to keep those series cohesive. But the way that the Cosmere has been revealed to everyone else has been through the publication order, at least for the people who have been reading the Cosmere as it came out, right? It's like
Mm.
when you think of something like the Marvel movies, right? You can watch all of the Captain America movies and all of the Avengers movies, but you can also watch them as they came out. Same with Star Wars, that kind of stuff. So that's going to be our reading order. We're going to be going through it in publication order. Actually, I didn't read things in publication order the first time, so I'm kind of calling myself out. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. Each podcast is probably going to cover roughly 3 to 5 chapters. We will be taking our time and going through the books. And again, once we have more than one Cosmere book under our belt, we'll be able to uh, try to get some of the connections and stuff. We're hoping to release an episode at least every week.
Hmm.
One of the fun things that we do for our book club when as we're reading through books is we like to find artwork of the characters, all that kind of stuff, and share it with one another as we're going through. So we'll try to do that in these episodes as well. And any links to any of that kind of stuff will be in the show notes or in the YouTube video description, wherever that ends up. And yeah, I mean, I think that's it, unless there's something else you wanted to mention.
I think it's pretty much it. I think the premise of the podcast is to explore these different universes, or I guess series from different authors. But we don't want to. I mean, we don't want to just stick with Sanderson, but I think having Sanderson first is a good jumping point.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, I'm excited to start reading it because there's a lot of hype around his work, and I'm happy to say that it's pretty good so far for his first book.
Admittedly, it's a lot of hype that I
Did
was
you build it?
promoting. Yeah, that I was building
Well,
up
I
for
heard
you.
it from you first, and then other people I mentioned to people like, "Oh, have you heard of Sanderson before?" Like, "Oh yeah, he's so good." And then they would also go on the rant of like, or not the rant, but of like the discussion of like he writes a lot of books, and he's
Yes.
also a good writer. And I'm like, oh boy, it's daunting. So,
Yes.
so that's yeah. So expect a lot of Sanderson, I guess, out of this podcast,
Yeah.
but it won't
The
be strictly to Sanderson.
yes. The first thing that we're going to tackle is the Cosmere, and we're going to try and get through it. And
Mm.
going through 3 to 5 chapters a week means it's going to take a while.
It's gonna take a while.
But we're both dedicated readers, so once we're caught up with the Cosmere, we'll probably move on to something else,
Mm.
some other big universe. Maybe we'll jump to sci-fi, since that's your realm, and I haven't read a lot of it, but I
Ooh,
do love science fiction.
yes.
So yeah.
Mm.
yeah, so I think that's it. Next episode will be the first 3 chapters of Elantris. Like I said, I've read the first chapter and loving it so far. You've read a little bit further ahead, and I know that you're liking it. We'll take some notes. We'll discuss what's happening, and I will try not to spoil any Cosmere connections for you.
Thanks for that.
Cool. All right. Then that is it. That is our quick intro episode. The next one will probably be longer because we'll be talking for about the 3 chapters and we'll be going on for a bit. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we'll bookmark that for later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.